So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a pie, and it's going to be a miso winter squash pie. I'm saying because I have a can of pumpkin. If you have a can of butternut squash, make it a butternut squash pie. You don't have a slow cooker, put it in your oven. It's just fine. Don't want to eat a crust, because this is probably the most oil that I will have ever brought out in a whole class ever, because I am going to make a pie crust so I can stick it into the slow cooker and let it cook while we're making everything else. So you do have an option of just cooking the filling in little ramekins and foregoing the oil altogether. So I'm sorry, but I feel like I would be doing a disservice to not show a pie crust, even though I am making gluten-free pie crust, not even from scratch. So what we're going to do is we're just going to, usually what we do is just pulse it with some, we're going to pulse it in the food processor. You could also just use a pastry roller, you know, the little pastry. I know there's a name for it and I can't think of it right now. So we're going to use 4 tablespoons of cold shortening, and I hesitate to say this out loud, 12 tablespoons of vegan butter. So, and again, before anybody gets too terribly upset, is you can totally not make the crust at all, okay? And we're just going to pulse this. And I would show you up top, but I think you're going to see better here. And actually, you don't want to do it too much because you don't want everything to melt. And what we really want it to end up looking like right now, it's not quite cornmeal-y enough, but it's starting to look more like cornmeal. And what that means is the little pieces of fat are breaking up really small. Oh, let me let you see that better. I'm so sorry, you guys. And let me see if I can get this. There we go. So instead of looking just like flour, it almost looks like cornmeal. That's what we're going for. Okay, so we're going to do this just a little bit longer. And you don't want to overwork it. It's a little cooler in here, so I have a little more leeway than I would maybe in the summer, where everything's going to melt and warm up so quickly. And you can kind of see that going. And I'm trying to see. Okay, so we've got that pulsed out pretty good. So see how now that looks a lot like cornmeal? But isn't it weird that it looks like that? So we're going to take some cool-ish water and add to it and keep pulsing until it just makes a ball. So I'm going to get a little extra back here, but we're probably going to add, it's guessing 6 tablespoons. So I will measure it like a grown-up human being might do it. Let's do 3 first. 2, 3. And let's pulse this a little bit. And actually you can see better from the front. Let me let you see that. Okay. See how it's getting a little stodgier? It's coming down a little bit more, being weighted down. I'll let you see it from the top too. So you can see there's a couple little things that are starting to form. Things now will stick together a little bit more. It's still not in a ball though, which we weren't expecting since we only put half the water in the first time. You can kind of see how it's starting to come together really good up there. And some of it's going to depend, so it's still a little dry. It's not really exactly in a ball. I'm going to just make sure I'm taking anything that's extra wet and mixing it up good. I'm going to add a couple, I'm probably going to add 2 more tablespoons because we don't want it to be too wet, but we also don't want to just spend a lot of time putting it in and then having it crumble away. There we go. And so a good test is grab it. Does it look like pie dough? Now this is gluten-free, so it's going to be more crumbly than if you use wheat flour. So just know that. I'm still going to go ahead and add another tablespoon of water. I feel like it could just use a little bit more moisture in its world. If you are using wheat flour, you really don't have the same leeway, because there we go. Do you guys see how that's really coming together now, kind of into a ball? Can you see it from the front too? Or so what I've done is I've taken my slow cooker, and this is just a big piece of parchment, and I put it in there as evenly as I can. I'm going to get in here and make sure this can go into a nice ball. And what that's letting me know is, is the mixture too wet? Is it too dry? And I may not use all of this pie crust. Because like I said, I'm doing it a little different than I did in the vegan slow cooker, where I make a whole wheat pie crust from scratch. So what you could do is you could roll that dough out, or you can do something I've been doing for years, which is to kind of just take some of it, put it around, and press it in. It's not going to be as perfect, but we're making this in the slow cooker, people. This is not pastry extravaganza. And if you take just little bits like this and put it in, we can even it out later. So don't worry about that. I am probably going to end up using just about half of it. So what we're doing now is we're evening it out. If I end up making any holes, I will repair those holes, because I don't want it to be too thick, and I want to get some of that. You can also press your fist in there, because I want to get some up for the sides. And we can still add more dough up on the sides too. We've got a lot right now. And what we're doing is we're just taking and making, a traditional winter squash pie a little more interesting and a little more fun. Let me get this down. So we're going to use 1 can of pumpkin or butternut squash puree. Then we're going to use a box of silken tofu. So it's 12.3, it's still 12.3 ounces. If you get your silken tofu not in these shelf-stable boxes, you can just measure it out. We want to do about 3/4 cup of brown or coconut sugar. Let's do it this way. And I've got brown sugar because I ran out of coconut sugar. You could also use date sugar. And again, so especially if you want to make the puddings and you're looking to do this in a more whole food plant-based way, use the filling, no crust. We're going to put them in like little ramekins and bake them until they're good. We're going to put a couple of teaspoons of miso in here. And this adds a salt, and actually it just adds a really nice flavor. And it makes it just a little bit different. We're also going to put about a teaspoon of molasses. If you feel okay using molasses with your whole food plant-based diet, I would encourage you not to leave that one out, because it also brings a lot of flavor for just that little bit of oomph. So we're going to do about 3/4 of a teaspoon of ground ginger. And actually, let you see what we're putting in here. Ooh, do I know how many? I don't think I put any of these in yet. 1, 2, 3. If I put some in before, it's going to be extra gingery this year. We're going to put a 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, right? Yeah. And we're going to put about a teaspoon of cinnamon. And just like anything else, Like this cinnamon's way newer, so I might not need as much as I did before. But I love cinnamon, so I don't care. But you could, and so even here, I can get some hints of the miso with the hints of the spices, a little sniff of molasses that's going on in there. So let's go ahead and blend this stuff together. And in my recipes, I'm always saying, and I'll show you why, we stop and we scrape down the bowl a lot. So if I show you, you can kind of see the chunks that are coming down, right? The things that aren't incorporated. And all it takes is a little bit of this, and that'll really help. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. So actually, I was about to change cameras, but let me let you see. Do you see how, you can see how much smoother it is from just those few minutes, right? So it's got that beautiful sweetness of brown sugar, which could also be dates. So it's way better than normal pumpkin pie to me. With the miso and the molasses and the brown sugar, it's giving it kind of that darker thing. And so now let's talk for a minute about baking in your slow cooker. And this is a recipe, so if you're thinking of doing this in your Instant Pot, don't. Use your oven, okay? I'm just doing this because it's fun. We could have just put this in a pie pan, or 2 pie pans, or a square casserole dish, or whatever we wanted to, and put it in the oven. If you don't have a slow cooker, that is the option I want you to use. Baking on slow cooking in your Instant Pot doesn't work the way you want it to. So there are a couple of things you need to know. Slow cooking is wet heat, right? Moist heat, air frying, oven, dry heat. So we need to have something, because what's going to happen is as this cooks, moisture is going to come up here and drip down and keep the middle of your pie soft. And at some point near the end, we may even take this off and just let it cook for a little bit, or this whole thing can go in the oven if you need to firm everything up. So typically what I do is you have to have a clean dish towel. And if it doubles, that's awesome. Then we're going to get us a wooden spoon. Trying to find, so something like this. Then is that going to be wide enough? Yeah. And I'm going to cook it like this. So what that does is it lets a lot of steam escape. It is going to slow the cooking. So we're going to take it over here. And I'm going to put it on 2-quart high for 2 hours. I can let you guys see this. So you see how there's condensation? So also when I check it, every time you check it, it is going to take a little longer. I can also wipe off some of this condensation with a clean towel. But the darkerness around the edges, it's not an optical illusion. That's where it's set up. So again, see how it was back here. Now we've got another ring of cooked. And so we'll know it's done all the way when the middle is pretty close to that, or the middle bare. If it's just like a little teeny tiny jiggle in the very center, that's okay. It will also set up a little more in the fridge. So again, this is something I would encourage you to make ahead of time and just have ready.